I just wanted to introduce myself quickly. My name is Alexandra Wade. I work in school community relations, and I will be moderating today and sharing questions from people who are watching. So if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll be watching there, and I can bring those up in discussion as we go along. And then there's also a question portion at the end. So yeah, if we want to give another minute or so for people to join, and then Alicia, you can take it away.
Alexandra, I believe there is a question in the chat box right now. I don't know if there is a call-in phone number.
Okay, I will look for that number and see if I can send that to that person. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and get started with my opening comments, and then people will join as I'm speaking, and that is just great. First, I would like to welcome everybody to the first PTO meeting of the 2021 school year. My name is Alicia Emanuel, and I am a co-chair of the Valley Southwoods Parent-Teacher Organization. My co-chair, Andy Littman, and I are so glad you are joining us for this virtual meeting, either live right now or viewing this on the YouTube recording of this meeting. Whether your family is experiencing school online or in person, this year is notably different than past years in so many ways. But as we start to settle into our new routines, my hope is that you are also starting to notice things that are familiar to you as well. Welcoming messages from teachers, connecting with school counselors, and plenty of emails from school to keep us in the loop have definitely helped my family feel a little more normal these first few weeks of school. Our PTO's mission of connecting families, teachers, and administrators is as important as ever right now. We want to thank each and every one of you on this call for your involvement during the Return to Learn process. Thank you for listening and sharing your thoughtful questions and insights with our leaders today. And thank you for your grace and kindness to one another as we learn together this year. I want to turn things over to my co-chair, Andy Littman, to go over a few announcements and then also to introduce our speakers for today's meeting. Andy?
Welcome, everybody. Some quick announcements. First, PTO donations and volunteers are needed. If you have not yet filled out your PTO donation form or volunteer form, please go to our website where you can do both online, or you can contact our membership chair, Stephanie Horak, who's here, or our volunteer chair, Jennifer Hayes, who is also here. Our donation form is the only place that you can order your copy of the school directory, and that will be printed off later this month. Our organization supports the students and staff of Valley and Valley Southwoods in many ways throughout the year, but we can only continue to do it with your help. Our website is www.vhspto.org. The second announcement is about the West Des Moines Community Schools Foundation Student Scholarship Fund. The Student Scholarship Fund has a Facebook page and an upcoming website. For up-to-date information on available scholarships for West Des Moines students, please like their Facebook page at Facebook and then WDMSF. Boy, I'm going to start that over. WDMSSF. Finally, we're going to be taking questions and insights for today's presenters. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and we will get through as many as we can during our 1-hour meeting after we hear updates from each speaker. Our first presenter is Valley Southwoods Principal Mitch Cooner.
All right, thanks, Andy. It's always a little stressful to go first because I know that we're also going to hear from the district perspective from Dr. Ramey, and then from Valley High School's David Maxwell as well. So I just, first and foremost, just want to say thank you for all of our parents for your flexibility, your patience, checking your emails constantly, I'm sure, just as we all are. This year has been off to, I'm going to say, a strong start, considering all of the circumstances with COVID, and about 25% of our students are online, 75% of our students are in person. I'm just going to real briefly just touch on things that our freshmen probably are families might be wondering about and ways that people can continue to get involved. Andy certainly mentioned it, and so did Alicia. You know, first of all, attending these meetings is always going to be an important piece for our freshman families to know what our parents are up to and where you can actually contribute for us. We're still learning where those contributions are going to take place. I mean, things that the freshman high school used to do would, early in the year, we usually had after a football game kind of bonfire and fun night. And those are the types of activities that right now are on pause. And so a lot of times we'd have donations, we'd have families come in to help chaperone. So I'm sure David will touch on some of our homecoming expectations that we're moving into that homecoming week here in a couple of weeks. But for the building itself, I just wanted to touch base on kind of what I feel the start has been and where we can improve and maybe what we're trying to work on. And the first piece is, like, we did everything in our power to, you know, get our kids set up and ready to go. And we did that on the very first day of school. We also had online families checking out their materials, able to come in and get their pictures at a separate time from the whole building population. And that happened on the very first day of school for Southwoods. I would say it was relatively successful. We were able to complete all those tasks that we needed to on that day, like the Chromebook checkout to do the exchanges and get your IDs and photos taken. We didn't have a few items like the lanyards that we wanted the kids to wear, though. They got those this past week, and I want to thank PTO. I believe their donations are going to help cover the cost of that, both, or at least partially, for Valley and Valley Southwoods. So I want to say thank you for our parents for that. What we're learning as we moved into the start of the school year is the communication. Communication is key. I know from Southwoods' perspective, and I want everybody to understand this, that I was a little bit more hands-off with that communication because we really wanted that coming from the district level so that we didn't overwhelm and confuse. As we've gotten into the school year, we're now drilling down into the more challenging conversations of, like, I don't know what to do for this class. Some things that we've done on our end as counselors and the admin team is that we do have a document from our teachers that kind of outlines, I asked the same question of all my teachers. I have a one-page document that says basically any online experience that my teachers are providing, the links, how they're doing it, what they need to do. And that's what I've been sharing with families that are still maybe lost. We've done a really good job with families that started online. We're a little more challenging. Our deadline to change back and forth between online and in person was September 4th. So right now we're holding everybody in their current status, but we did have some families that jumped right there at that September 4th mark that we now need to get up to speed with the online piece. So after this week, I would like to believe that we're at least up to speed and our families are aware of where they need to be and our students are engaging. I think it's very important that at any point in time, if you have a question or something's not quite working right, in my building at least, we want you to reach out to your counseling team first. So it's Tess Grand-Jeanette is A through K, PJ Cox is L through Z, and they will be your first line of defense for anybody that's either on site or online if you're having challenges along the lines of the schooling piece of it. Some major changes that have taken place at our building is that in Valley High School is the schedule in general. We are a block schedule, so we're 4 periods each day. So when we rotate, we still have the orange and black, but like on any given day, you might do your 1, 3, 5, and 7 one day, and then your 2, 4, 6, 8 the next. Longer class periods. Our middle class period or middle block class, we call it 5th or 6th. That's where we're having lunch. One of our mitigation strategies there was that we had 5 lunches instead of just 3, which cut our numbers down in our cafeteria to, right now, we're no more than 80 students that would be eating in our cafeteria space, and we have individual tables at Southwoods that are spaced out 7 feet apart in all directions. And so I have just been really overwhelmed with the kids' abilities to follow their directions. I mean, we're still coaching as we go, but we had one bad day at lunch and our admin team got together and organized and literally corrected that within 12 hours or less. And the next day and since then has been very smooth. Other strategies that we're working on in our space to help, like I said, with the mitigation. We've installed many of the hand sanitizers throughout our areas, so that pretty much any class that you walk past or are going to walk into, you're going to walk past a hand sanitizer. We have all of our social distancing spacing markers on the outside and the floor, inside and outside our building. So I've just really been impressed with how the kids are managing and really following through the directions. New thing this year, there's no lockers being used at our building, and so kids have the backpacks, and so it's really created a unique dynamic between classes. I don't see kids doing a lot of standing around waiting. They are doing what they need to do, and we've really appreciated that. So those are just some broad overview things, but again, to our families, I just want to say thank you for your flexibility and your patience. But at any point in time, if you have questions, please reach out to myself or our team, especially our counselors, if it's something to do with a coursework for your kids or something might be a struggle there. Because that's going to be the key this year, is like, how do we keep in contact with all of our kids, whether they're on site here or off site online. So thanks for the time today. And again, I'll be here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Cooner. We're going to pass it over to Mr. Maxwell, Principal Maxwell at Valley High School.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, PTO, for allowing me this opportunity to talk with parents. Before I start, though, I have to say and acknowledge and thank you to PTO, specifically Andy and Alicia, for all of the help that they gave us right before and the first few days of school, and helping us get our IDs taken and Chromebooks exchanged. Andy and Alicia, you guys are phenomenal at organizing and putting a plan together. And so I was thinking about writing you individually, but I wanted to make it a public acknowledgement in front of all of our parents to say thank you so much for all the help that you have given us so far this year and that you continue to give us. And so just saying that, we've had a great start to the school year. We actually had our online kids come to our building on the day before the first day of school, on the 25th, where they had their IDs taken and they exchanged their Chromebooks. And then the first 3 days of school is when we had the process for our seniors, juniors, and our sophomores. A lot of what Southwoods is doing, Valley High School is also doing with the mitigation pieces. Everybody has a face covering before they enter the building. We have our hallways. If you've had a chance to come into Valley, you'll see the signs, which has Mr. Kranovich, Mr. Valley High School himself, which he is pointing to the right and says, please stay to the right. So our hallways have been divided pretty much right down the middle, with students traveling on either side going to their classes. Our cafeteria is plexiglassed out. Every table has a piece of plexiglass on it as a divider for our students. But one thing that we try to do is lower the amount of kids in our cafeteria. So usually and historically, only seniors have had the opportunity to take advantage of an open lunch period. But this year, we also said juniors were able to leave the school for lunch. Now, unfortunately, they don't get as much time as they have in years past, because we have actually increased our lunches from 3 to 5 lunches in order to try to lower the number of kids in the cafeteria. And the amount of time that students have to actually leave campus, go get something to eat, and then come back in time for class, they just feel it cuts a little too close. So we still have a few kids who stick around school and do take advantage of lunch in the cafeteria. One thing that I communicated to our staff back in June at our first virtual staff meeting was I asked the question, how will Valley High School thrive during a pandemic? It's not enough to just simply survive, but we want to thrive. We actually want to get better. And so our teachers have been planning, and they are now in the process of providing that synchronous learning for our online kids as well as our on-site kids, where they have both groups in the room at the same time together. And using technology where they each wear a microphone, which is plugged into their laptop computers, they're able to deliver the instruction both on-site and online. We're running into some challenges, of course. One of the big things that I'm hearing from our teachers is how difficult it is to really know if the online learners are there and engaged. Because oftentimes what they'll see is a blank screen. They'll just have a screen with the name on it, and the mics are muted. And they just are trusting that the kids are there, but they're not really sure. The question was asked, do we force students to turn their cameras on? And, you know, we want to build a trusting relationship between the online kids and the classroom peers. And so we're trying to develop that relationship. We're trying to help have the teachers build the trust, because sometimes there might be some students who don't necessarily want an entire class looking inside their private space at their homes. So we're trying to focus on building those relationships with their online kids. We surveyed our staff last week and asked them, what are some things which are going well? What are some things which are challenges? And the online engagement and online relationship building, that came across as one of the biggest challenges that the teachers are experiencing right now. But I'm just so proud of how everybody has adapted during this time period, this unique situation that we're in. Every single student has their faces covered, everyone. Any rumors that are out there where people don't have their faces covered, they're just rumors, because I try to be in the hallways during each passing period. I'm in the cafeteria, and there might be one or two students who you'll see with the mask down, and I just simply say, you need to cover your face, please. Oh, I forgot, and it goes right back up. But we don't have any kind of, resolute students who are just, saying, I'm not going to wear a mask. Everybody has a mask. Everybody has their faces covered, which leads me to this point. And any help we could get from parents really help us out. And that is, as Mitch mentioned, we're asking our students to wear their IDs this year, because as an administrator, it's so hard to recognize kids when all you see is this, when all you really see are their eyes. And so we want, the kids who have been wearing their IDs, I love walking up and just looking at their pictures and seeing their name. Okay, I got you. I got you, because we do want to focus on building those relationships with our kids. So we've passed out the lanyards and the ID holders, and we're getting somewhat of a response, but not the kind of response that I'd like to see. I'd like to see more students wearing their IDs. So parents, if you can just encourage your kids just to wear their IDs, plus it helps with building security. When kids come into the building, we like to make sure that they're Valley students. And again, when people are wearing masks and covering their faces, it's really hard to discern whether they're supposed to be here or whether they're not. We haven't had any problems so far, and we're trying to make sure that everybody who's on our campus are Valley personnel, Valley students or staff. All of our staff, they wear their IDs, and so again, we'd love for our students to do the same. So I'm going to send another email on Sunday, basically reiterating the fact how important it is for students to wear their IDs, and just to approach it the same way that they do a mask. You know, we need a mask to enter the building. We need a mask to be at Valley. Same thing with our IDs. We need our students to wear their IDs as well. So again, that's, we've had a great start so far. One thing I do want to share, I've started this, and hopefully everybody can see it. Oh, there we go. Let's see here. Okay, so in our main hallway across from the office, we have a sign that says Days in School. And every day, right around lunchtime, I up the number by 1. And I want to see how high can we get, and anticipating we don't go into school closure into the required continuous learning, where everybody's online. I want to keep Valley open as long as possible, preferably for the entire year, focusing mainly on the first semester, definitely through the first semester. So every day we have a running total. Right now we're at 9, and I want to see just how high we can get, hopefully get through the entire semester without having to go to the required continuous learning. Okay, so parents, thanks for listening. That's it, and I'll stick around as well to answer any questions that anybody might have.
David, thank you so much for all that information. Do you have any updates on homecoming that you want to share with this group?
Yes, thank you, Alicia. Appreciate it. So this year, there's certain pieces of homecoming that are going to stay, some that are going to change. Some of the things that we chose not to do this year, just because of the increased number of virus cases which have been reported, the positivity rate rising. And we're trying to avoid bringing large groups together. So we are not going to have the parade, nor the carnival, which we usually have down at Valley Stadium. And unfortunately this year, we're not going to have the dance. That is just, is just too high risk. So instead, we're going to continue, we're going to have the dress-up days that the students participate in, and online kids, they're more than welcome as well to participate in those. We're also going to have the Powder Puff game. That's where the girls play football against each other. And then we're also going to have, instead of a homecoming assembly, we're going to have a virtual assembly. And we are going to show that the Friday of homecoming, I believe we're going to start it at 2:25 in the afternoon. So students will still be in school, but we're going to show it during that time. And I believe it will be on the district's YouTube channel, so anybody will be able to watch it as well. We'll also, of course, have the football game. And right now, I believe we're in the process of voting for the homecoming royalty.
Thank you. Thanks for that update. All right, we are going to go pass it on to Superintendent Dr. Lisa Ramey. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, before we move on, we have a couple of questions that are pertinent just to Valley. So in keeping with the homecoming theme, we have a question about an alternate homecoming dance being planned in the spring if virus levels allow. They want to know if that would be a possibility.
That is a great idea, and I'm going to write this down. And anything that I can't answer, that I want to make sure that I touch base with my leadership team as well as the student council sponsors. So an alternate dance in spring.
Okay, great, thank you. And then we also had a question about students who are in DMAC classes at Valley. Could you explain a little bit about what lab opportunities might look like for them, just to have that engagement and kind of connection?
Sure. There are some classes that have a performance piece to them where students have to demonstrate proficiency around a skill or a standard. Those classes that require that kind of a demonstration, whether it's a DMAT class or maybe even a career and technical education class, one of our CTE classes, we're asking that the student make an arrangement with the teacher and that they set up a time when the student can come into the building and do that demonstration. So it might be before school, it might be after school. One thing that if the student has to come to school, we do ask that we try to consider the teacher's time, not necessarily that contract time, but maybe before school. If 7:15 would be an advantageous time for both the student and the teacher. Or if after school is the only opportunity and that takes place and that happens. But we do have some classes which do require students to come into the building to demonstrate that skill or that standard.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on to Lisa.
All right, thank you, Alicia and Andy. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share a few things from a district perspective and then answer any questions as well. I too want to start out by saying thank you. Thank you to all of our parents. This is really an unprecedented year for us, and we've had to think differently than we've ever been challenged to before. And I just appreciate the grace and the patience that our parents have afforded us. And that's been very helpful for all of us. I also want to say, reiterate what you've heard from either Mitch and David about the mask. We were worried. We knew when we could not say that we were going to 100% be able to social distance, we knew we needed to then take that next step of requiring face coverings. And I will tell you, it's been unbelievable. We were worried that it would be difficult to have people wear masks and have those on all day. And I am telling you, from kindergarten all the way through in the buildings that I've been in, kids are doing a fabulous job. And I hear from all of our administrators that it has not been a struggle at all. And quite frankly, seeing a lot of masks being worn even at the elementary level. And then they use the face shields for that plexiglass when they're at kidney tables or in some small group work. So it's been really interesting to see, and I'm just so grateful to our students for following those rules. We also, as you heard Mitch say, allowed families to change from that on-site to online through September 4th, which caused some challenges depending upon where you're at in our system. But we did land where 29% of our families have chosen the online option for the rest of the semester, and so we're at 71% on site each day, which equates to a little over 6,000 students that are coming into our buildings every day, which is pretty amazing as we think about that we haven't had to move fully online in any one of our buildings yet. We've had some classrooms at the elementary level where we've transitioned to fully online due to some cases and due to the number of close contacts, that we just moved the whole class there for sometimes as low as 2 days, so 48 hours, and sometimes up to about 14 days. So that has been taking place over the first few weeks of school. I also want to say thank you to our families for being understanding of us adding a couple PD days for our staff. So September 4th was the first professional development day, so last Friday, and I'll tell you, our teachers couldn't say thank you enough when they would see me in the hallways prior to that day or even on that day or after. They're just so thankful that we had the forethought to think, let's start school, let's see what's happening, and then have a day where we can make some adjustments if needed. And then we also have the 14th, next Monday, coming up as well. And I know already, as I hear from teachers in meetings that I was in yesterday about what they want to do and use that time for, so that they can better perfect their time with students who are online and or in person. And I would tell you from that secondary perspective, that's a little more challenging for those teachers who have both happening at the same time. And so they're really having to figure out what works best so that they can ensure to give as much quality time to those online learners as well as those learners who are in person on a daily basis. I want to just talk a little bit about our matrix, because I know, and I take responsibility, I didn't mean to confuse families when we put our matrix together. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's our transition matrix to if we would ever need to move a full building or our full district to completely virtual or that continuous online learning. We were very careful. We were not comfortable with the 15 to 20% that the state is asking. We were very careful though in the wording that we used and said may consider a transition, may convene the board, so that we knew it wasn't a black or white decision. It is, let's look at the positivity rate at the county level, but then let's also look at what's happening within our schools, both for our students and our parents or our teachers. And so with all of that information together, while the positivity rate did bump up over that 10% for 5 days, and actually it was, I think, about 8 or 9 days in a row, and we're now down to 8.2, which was great to see that it's been decreasing. But we convened our Board of Education on day 4 just so we could have that conversation. This is all new territory for us, and so we're going to learn, maybe stub our toe even at times, but we really felt because of the low numbers within our students' absentee rate and our staff absentee rate, that we should continue to stay in school instead of move to online right away. And I know, you know, everybody has different opinions on that, and I appreciate that and always willing to listen. But I just wanted to clarify that it isn't 100%. It's not black and white. We'll look at all of the data and then make the best decision that we believe possible for our kiddos as well as our staff. Mitch had alluded to the lunch. So I would say if I could name one thing that was, I'll use the term disaster almost, since school started. It was day one and it was lunch. And it wasn't only at the secondary level, it was system-wide, and it just, what we thought would work, didn't work well. We quickly, late in the day, got all of our administrators together, elementary separate and secondary separate, to regroup, problem solve, and try to make that experience better. And I know it's gone swimmingly well at the secondary level. And elementary, it's gotten a lot better. There's still, we were talking today at a meeting about some other tweaks that we need to make at the elementary level. But that's been the biggest, I think, hurdle that we had from the beginning. And then finally, what I will say, and then open it up to questions, the dashboard. So we have been trying to get out accurate data to our families, so you can see as we have cases, whether they're student or staff, that we put that information together so parents are informed and trying to be as transparent as possible. We have quite the team that's put together for our contact tracing, and that takes a long time. And sometimes it feels as though we are the last to hear about a case, that lots of maybe other students may be here, or families here, and then we're the last to know. So as soon as we hear about a case, our team that's in place goes to work on the contact tracing and communicating with our operations department for cleaning, myself, because I'm not actually the one on that team that does all the work. They communicate with me, and we then make the decision on, do we need to move a class or a school to a continuous learning online. And then our communications department for that communication to go out. And now we've got metrics together that we think on a daily basis we can update our families on those new cases. So hopefully you all saw this newsletter yesterday that had that dashboard in it. Our goal is every day we would be reporting the previous day's information, so that you have the most up-to-date information that we have as we go through. One clarification on that I want to make sure everybody knows. So this happens mostly at the elementary level so far, knock on wood, but when we have a classroom that, let's say out of 20 on-site kiddos, 6 of them were identified as close contacts. So we put the full class out on continuous learning online for a minimum of 2 days, maybe up to 14. The students who are close contacts and have to quarantine are counted in our numbers that you see on the dashboard. The rest of the class that wasn't considered a close contact, so let's say it's 20 in the class, 6 were close contacts, the other 14 are not considered quarantining. They're just online while we take time to either, if it's cleaning the classroom, or if it's, sometimes we put them online because it's the number of the students in the class that we are moving to online is so great to make it to make it as easy as possible for all the kids as well as our staff, the teacher. So sometimes it's not easy to have that both in person and online, and sometimes it's just easier if they're all in one type of learning. So if that's going to be for a longer period of time and it's a larger percent of the class, that's why we put the whole class out, but we don't count those who weren't considered close contacts in our data in the dashboard. I think that is it. I'm always open to questions. I too want to say I think it's really been a fabulous start to the year. I've heard lots of positives from our teachers when I've been in buildings, as well as a meeting that I was in with teachers last night. They're just so glad to be back with kids, and to be, whether that's kids online or kids in person, they're just so glad to be back teaching and doing the craft that they so love to do.
So Dr. Ramey, this may be a question that you could answer. We had a question in the Q&A about it seeming like there were positive cases frequently, so that kind of ties to that dashboard you were talking about, and they were just wondering if that was something to be concerned about. So I didn't know if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, so, I would tell you that it's not surprising that we are having cases because of the community spread. So if you've spent a lot of time since March reading and listening to what the CDC says, anything over 5% positivity rate is really widespread community spread. And so it would not be surprising that we would have cases. And what felt like too, to me, that those first few days, it seemed like a lot of cases right away. And then all of a sudden the positivity rate went up over 10%. And it took me time to put my emotion to the side for a moment, step back, and really look at, out of all of the students that we have coming to school, what percent of positive cases do we have within our student body as well as our staff. And once I could put that in perspective, then what feels like a lot isn't really a lot when you consider all of those factors. It's interesting, we could, Tuesday, I believe we had 4 different situations that we were contact tracing through. And then yesterday, none. So it's interesting how it seems to all happen on the same day. And I just, as I've said before, continue to encourage when kiddos, and I say this to our staff too, when we're not here in school, those mitigation strategies that we talk about, wearing our masks when we can't social distance, making sure we're hand washing frequently, staying home when we're not feeling, reducing the size of groups that we're involved in. We just need to continually think about that so that we can continue to have school and all of the extracurricular and co-curricular that we all want our kids to be involved in.
Great, thank you. Another related question, I know you had touched on this when you were talking about the matrix and transitioning. I think this question is just wanting some clarification, since we had talked about that 10% or more, then we looked at the that 0 to 17 years age group. So I think they're just wanting some clarification on what numbers we're following, what they should be following, and what that will look like.
Yeah, so in our entire matrix, we talk about the positivity rate for the county. We talk about the student absentee rate and staff absenteeism, or not being able to staff. So we are looking, as far as percentages, the dashboard, that's what we're looking at. So that's what we're trying to give to you as well, so that our families can see that data. As far as being able to staff, we did not want to say a specific absentee rate for our staff, because we may end up sometime finding that we don't have enough bus drivers to even be able to transport kids to school because of either positive cases that they have and or that they're quarantined due to being close contacts. Or we might not be able to serve lunch. So we have to look at all of our staff, from whether it's classroom teachers. So there may be a time when we can't get enough substitutes, whether that be classroom, for lunch, for drivers, that we will have to move to some type of continuous learning, whether that be at a building level or even possibly at the district level. But the metrics that we have in the dashboard are the metrics that we're watching, plus the Polk County positivity rate. But we are looking, if you go to the Iowa Department of Public Health, they have a school section that has a whole host of different data points. So you can see that it's by age group, positivity rate, the antigen rate, all sorts of different pieces. And if I could actually probably tell you, so it's coronavirus.iowa.gov. And then maybe I'll just send it and we could post it in the chat, Alexandra. I'll email it to you. That'll be easiest because it's long. I look at that multiple times a day. That's where I can find out the positivity rate and all of the other metrics that we are continuing to watch as we go through hopefully just the fall semester, but I have a feeling all year long.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, panelists, is there anything else that we need to cover or go over before we move into questions? We do have several.
I think we're ready to start with the questions, I think, Alexandra.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so I know this is, again, something that has been touched on a little bit, but we've had several questions just about online versus on-site, remoting in, and how that could look different from class to class. So there may be some that spend more time remoting in and some that spend more time in an online module or doing independent learning. So I didn't know if we wanted to clarify why that might look different between classes or between grade levels.
Yeah, I kind of I saw that question too, so I'll take that one on right now. You know, teachers were given the opportunity to kind of do multiple ways to try to meet student needs. And I'm going to use the example of that seems to be coming up here of that concept of a flipped classroom. It's a term that we use where the teacher would video record a lesson, and it is expected that the students would watch that lesson and be able to then respond accordingly with their feedback or with, you know, an assignment maybe that would be attached to that. The concern that I'm hearing from a lot of families is that in that flipped classroom model, you don't necessarily have the immediate feedback of the teacher. When we've done those flipped classroom pieces, we do require teachers to have office hours to be able to have some interaction. And I think the challenge is, because I know a lot of our students turn to the email right away and they'll ask for a question on email. And we do have to recognize that there are still kids probably in the seats, and so teachers are going to be responding to, I know probably this is true at Valley and at Valley Southwoods, of the 4 class periods that we have each day, our teachers are going to either have a plan or a PLC with their team in one of those 4. And so they're trying to utilize that time before after school or their prep time or PLC time to respond to those online students. And some even have specific office hours that say, hey, after school from 3:20 to 4:30. The concept of the flipped classroom is designed to actually free a student up from having to be sitting online from 8:20 to 3:20. It's giving them the opportunity to, you know, kind of adjust their day and be able to, like, oh, I know my social studies teacher has their classroom flipped, so I'm going to remote into my science. I'm going to be able to do my flipped classroom at a different time during the day. And it supposedly, in our opinion, gives a little more freedom for the student as to when they do that work. I do recognize, though, if you're a student that really thrives on that face-to-face interaction, that would be diminished at that point in time. So we haven't mandated that all teachers are doing that. I would say the district has a highly recommended that kids are remoting in and are live streaming at that. And some are very successful at that. I know there was a comment here about our debate teacher that he just has all the kids coming in, whether they're online or in person, into their Zoom chat room, and that seems to be the most effective. The problem is I've had other families say, oh, thank goodness for that flipped classroom, because that's also saved us in terms of our schedule. So we're doing the best we can. Our teachers are using multiple strategies, and as we learn and get stronger, I will point out the professional development days on the 9th and the 14th moved up in September here have totally been on how do I create a high quality video? How do I do better dialogue and discussion using breakout sessions in Zoom or Google Meets? And to be honest, the technology is actually starting to just pick up too. Google Meets didn't even have that function about 3 weeks ago, and now here they've got that built in. And so even the technology is changing with our teachers. So we're doing our best. Again, if it's not working for your student, that's where a key thing for me would be reach out to that teacher. Maybe we can set up a drop-in for that particular student and at the time that they could be actively in that classroom. So hopefully that answers partially.
Yes, great, thank you. So kind of sticking with some of these online learning type questions, we had a question about if someone was identified as a close contact, a student, would they transition online, or would they deal with it more like an illness in the past and just try and keep up on their work? And then related to that, when a classroom would have to transition online or a student, what does that communication look like? and what would they hear from the administrator or the teacher that would help guide them through that process?
Yeah, so the answer to the first half of that somewhat depends on, so if it's an individual student who is transitioning because identified as a close contact, that individual student is really treated more like a student who's ill and absent. Now at the secondary level, what's a little different about that, because there is that in most classes, and David and Mitch would be able to speak better to this, they have the option of remoting in. It's very possible that a student who's quarantined for 14 days would be able to remote in because that link is already there and the teacher could provide that to the on-site student who is quarantined. And is that correct, Mitch?
That's exactly correct. And I was going to say that's kind of where we're struggling. We're not struggling with it, but you front loaded all the online kids with the information they needed, and now what we're navigating is that student that, oh yeah, this person got identified and they have to quarantine for 14 days. We're having to be really responsive as teachers to say, how do I get this student now that was on site up to speed for those 2 weeks? And that's what we're getting better at. We're building some processes in with our counseling team that as soon as that student gets identified, we can zing off the information for their 6 teachers or 7 teachers so that we can get them moving in, engaged in the classroom from the online component as if they were an online student more quickly. But we have learned earlier on in the volume of students that are in that quarantine situation where they might not be sick themselves, but they've got to monitor themselves. We're getting better at that, and I don't know how David's experiencing that at Valley High School.
Yeah, our kids, we ask them to do if they have to go into quarantine is let the teachers know that they're going to be online for the next 2 weeks. Our teachers all standardized their Canvas pages before the school year started, so everybody's Canvas page, their Canvas course looks extremely similar, and that's when they can find all the online resources, the lesson planning for the week. It's a very seamless transition at Valley High School for kids who have to go into online learning if they have to go into that 2-week quarantine.
Yeah, and as far as the communication that goes along with that, that may look different if it's an individual student versus a class. If it's a full class, what our standard process is that that class receives a specific email. There's phone calls for close contact. So you get, if you're a close contact identified, you get a phone call. You get an email, the whole class does. And then as far as the building, we send out a building-wide notice as well so that people are aware. What gets challenging is probably time of day when sometimes we're notified at 8 o'clock at night. And so we start that process, and so we may not be able to get to the point of we're learning how do we make sure the teacher can communicate quickly enough because the next day a class may be going online. That's been a little clunky, I will admit, for us, and we're getting better as we work through the process, that's for sure.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we have just over 10 minutes left, I believe, so I think we're gonna wanna move through some of these next questions. One of the main questions I saw was concerning athletics, activities, and arts. So this parent wanted some clarification on if concerts would be allowed. I know right now they are not taking place, so they wanted some reasoning behind that decision and then wondered if it would be revisited.
I'll go ahead and jump in real quick.
Okay.
So when we think about the concerts, we look at our music program as a K-12 experience for our students and our families. And when we think about a concert that we usually have in our Performing Arts Center and the amount of students that are on the stage at one time, in our band hall at Valley, we are able to socially distance our students by using the full length of the band hall. Historically, we've always used the 2 halves, But what we did was we opened up the middle wall and we're going lengthwise instead so that we're able to socially distance our students. I don't think we're able to socially distance our kids on the stage at the Performing Arts Center. And it greatly reduces the capacity in our Performing Arts Center by limiting the number of people who can be in there. So I know that we have a meeting actually on Monday with our performing arts teachers to talk about this and to look to see if there's any different types of alternatives. With sports, it makes it easier because half of the sports are taking place outside. Volleyball, for instance, that's inside. We're in our field house, which is very cavernous, and the aerosol dissipation is a lot easier than it would be in the Performing Arts Center. You know, I've been in a Performing Arts Center for concerts, especially at the elementary, where it becomes standing room only, and that's with every section filled. If we limited the number of tickets to only parents, or you know, be able to provide that social distance, I'm not really sure if we would be able to socially distance even by only giving out a limited number of tickets per student. So we're going to revisit this on Monday, though.
Okay, great, thank you. We've also had some questions about students with IEPs and hiring for special education, how that's going, and then also what would be the best way for students with IEPs to seek more support or direction with their instruction.
Yeah, so I know at Valley, and I can speak only for Valley, that has been a considerable challenge. We had a number of resignations just before the school year started, and trying to fill those positions has been definitely a challenge. Our new associate principal, her name is Megan Thole. She has been doing a phenomenal job of just reaching out, trying to recruit, interviewing, and getting those spaces filled. It hasn't been easy by any means, but this is something which is definitely on our top list of priorities to make sure that we're providing students the resources that they need, as well as any help that we can help provide them. So that is definitely on our mind, and it's on the top of our radar right now, is making sure that our students with IEPs have the resources they need, both with instructional materials as well as the human associates which are in those classrooms, providing that support. One thing that we've tried to do is we have tried to look at our different designations of associates, whether they're a program associate or one-to-one associate, and how can we manage those resources in the absence of the associates that we currently have. So we're trying to be creative to make sure that all students who have those accommodations on their IEPs are being met and that we're in compliance. But again, it doesn't make it easy when you have a large number of people deciding that they don't want to come back 2 days before the school year starts.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple really quick questions about face coverings. One person wanted to know if Valley and Southwoods needed donations of masks or other face coverings. And then we had a question about a waiver for face coverings that would be similar to like the immunization requirements waiver.
Real quick, and Mitch, I'll let you talk about Southwoods. One thing that we're trying to do is teach our students how to be responsible for coming to the building every day prepared. You know, if we find ourselves in a position where if a student forgets a face mask, then they can go to the office and get one. I feel that almost teaches a learned helplessness. Every student has done a great job so far of coming to the building prepared with the face mask. So I do appreciate that offer, but I want to make sure that we don't send the message to kids that it's okay to leave your house without a face mask and come to school, and think that they can come into the building without a face mask, knowing that they can just pick one up from the office.
Yeah, David, we kind of we've taken the exact same stance, is that we really do expect students to have that when they come in. We're still all educators though, guys, and we still put students first. And so I absolutely have 100 or 200 face masks that I could use at any moment's notice. But to David's point, I don't want that to just become the norm, that I can just walk out the door and know that I'm going to be handed one at the door if necessary. And so we're actually recording that information as if it was a warning. Like, okay, you needed one. I get it. I've forgotten from time to time, and I needed somebody to pick me up. But we're actually recording that. So if it were to become something that was 1, 2, 3, now we're going to turn that into more of a disciplinary conversation with the family and find out how can we solve this. So it's kind of the approach we've taken, but I do want you to understand that yes, we have masks, and if somebody really needed one and that was a forgetful moment, we would cover that, but we're not just every day handing them out. So hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. And Mitch, same thing at Valley. We're recording also, and we do have some on hand that if a student does forget, that we will give them one, then have the friendly conversation. Remember, you got to remember it, and then we will record also, so that we are keeping track of if we're starting to see a pattern with the same students, that we'll have that conversation.
Yeah, and I would say too, we have, we at the district level purchased extra so that we could give them to the buildings when they ran out of their extras. So I'm not going to say, no, we don't need donations. Right now, I don't believe that we've had a flood of, that's what, again, kudos to our kiddos. They're bringing them to school, they're wearing them, so we haven't had to use a lot of the supply that we have. The other part of that question was around the waiver. There is a waiver. If you were needing to look and possibly have a waiver for the face covering, you would contact your building level admin. They have access to that waiver. They could give you that. There's some steps that you'd have to take and then to complete and return that to be approved for a waiver. But there is a waiver.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have another question coming in from the Q&A that we want to answer live. This person said, I imagine some teachers feel the anxiety of teaching during the pandemic. What kind of care are they being offered, including self-care and just guidance on their social emotional well-being?
Yeah, so I'll start first, and then Mitch and David, you may want to chime in. Part of our return to learn planning was around adult self-care as well as student self-care and social emotional learning, but we really started focusing on our adults. So some of our professional development has absolutely been around what is self-care. I don't think some of us are very good at that once in a while. In a meeting I was at last night, using an example where we actually had a get to know you kind of activity, but that activity was really around self-care. And there were so many positive comments like, wow, I could take this back to my building. So it was a district leadership team meeting. So these teachers then go back to their buildings and they could utilize that same activity. So really modeling and helping our staff identify some self-care strategies that they can use, because you are absolutely right, there is some anxiety. The other piece is, please know that through our human resources department, there is definitely the possibility of teachers having accommodations for anxiety that was brought up. We know that we have some staff that maybe due to their age or family members at risk, that they do have that concern. And so they've been working through that process with our human resources department as well.
One thing that we're trying to do at Valley is we are trying to keep our pulse, our thumb on the pulse of where our teachers are with regards to that social emotional piece. And we know that one of the biggest things which is causing anxiety for our teachers is this new space where we're in with technology and trying to provide that quality instruction to both their on-site and online kids. So one thing that we're trying to do is provide them with any resource and professional development. And that's what I'm so thankful for September 4th and September 14th. Has been that we're able to really provide some quality learning for our teachers around how to be proficient at that distance learning, how to be proficient at that virtual learning, and provide it in a way that the on-site kids are able to benefit from it as well. So, you know, trying to anticipate where the need is and what's causing the anxiety, and then providing that professional development to answer some of those questions which, you know, are creating that cognitive dissonance, the stress of, you know, they feel like they're first year teachers again. How can I, as your building principal, what do I need to do? What can I provide you to help ease some of that stress? So, and the feedback we've gotten from our teachers has been over the top appreciative. You know, there's been some conversations that coaches have heard where they're like, okay, now I got this piece figured out. I'm still kind of confused about this, but I got this all taken care of and it's working great now. So just, again, trying to anticipate what is needed and then provide them what is needed.
Great, thank you. I want to make sure that we are respecting everyone's time so we can wrap up here along those same lines. Just want to thank everybody for your kind words, seeing a lot of positive messages in the chat. And so thank you for being so gracious and for your patience again. That's going to wrap up our question and answer time for now. I tried to get to all of them. I know there are some that we may want to follow up on. So I will talk to Dr. Ramey and the principals about that. Before we go, PTO, anything else that you want to add?
Yes, thank you so much, Alexandra. You did a great job of getting to as many questions as we could. I just want to say thank you for coming, everyone, to this meeting. This is great attendance, and we would love to have you join us for our next meeting. That is going to be Thursday, November 12th at noon. And then also just a reminder, we really can't do this without you. So please check out our website at www.vhspto.org and donate either your time or your money. We are happy to take both. And thank you so much for being part of our school. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
One last thank you to our presenters. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and answering all these questions. We appreciate it. And we also appreciate the district allowing students to have choices on online. And I'm noticing in the chat, lots of people thanking you for allowing them the choice of doing it one way or the other rather than choosing for them. And that seems to be a theme. So thank you. Thank you for your choices for all of us.
You're welcome. And if there's any other questions that you want to send me later to follow up, however you want to do that, just let me know. Happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Same thing for me.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.